in this session for the next 50 minutes or however long we have together. We are going to fire through this session of whole family discipleship, joining the dots between church and home. But what I'm hoping to do is, at the end of the session, give a whole bunch of time before lunch for any questions. But also, I know it's like sometimes you might have certain conversations that you want to have, and sometimes we move straight into lunch or another session, but we will have that time where we can just reflect on maybe some things we felt encouraged or challenged. But also, I will be rushing off either to lunch. So if you've got any questions or things that I can help you, direct you towards care for the family, we can do that as well. So we will jump straight in. So whole family discipleship, joining the dots between church and home. Like I said earlier, for me, one of the whys, and I'm really passionate about coming alongside whole families in this idea of discipleship, but I'm also really excited and passionate about how do we equip churches to really understand their role to play in this. Do I have all the answers? No. That's why I love that we sit in a room like this, because I'm sure there's a wealth of wisdom and experience. But I'm passionate about this. How do we equip families and churches? So we're going to jump straight into this and then we will see. This is not school. So please, don't wait until the end. If you've got any questions or thoughts, just chuck your hand up and we will go there. I'm a very, in my speaking and the way I go, I'm not very structured. So I will go on tangents. So if you've got a question or a thought on something we're talking about, please do throw up your hand and I would love to go that way. Otherwise, I'll just keep going and then we'll land it somewhere. So, a little bit of research, a little bit of context to our conversation today. A number of years ago, 8 years ago I think it was, Care for the Family was before my time of working with Care for the Family. Care for the Family was put together, did some research that actually a number of years later, many denominations, such as the Church of England, the Baptist Association, and Salvation Army, lots of different churches and organisations have used that research to really now propel and direct much of their family ministry. And much of it is around the whole family, not just how do we do a children's provision or youth provision, but how do we equip and support the whole family. So much of what is taking place in churches now is using the research that was put together many years ago. I think it was 8 years ago now, and it was called Faith in the Families. And you can find that research if you love a little bit of bedtime reading, then that research papers are good for that. It'll definitely get you to fall asleep. But a couple of key things that have come out of that is the majority, and we know this kind of research, the majority of those who come to faith do so before the age of 19. There is also a lot of research that actually points to a lot younger age. And so I'm really passionate about helping churches recognise that there is such an opportunity to build faith and to come alongside families in under fives as well. And there's many conversations around the idea of age of understanding and things like that. But I know from seeing my 4.5-year-old that there is so much opportunity and openness to the things of God. So why wouldn't you want to come alongside that age group? So if you're involved in a toddler group or if you're involved in under fives ministry, I honestly believe that there is such an opportunity to help put foundations to build faith. And it's also helping parents, carers, grandparents understand and recognise that those ages, that age, it can be tiring, it can be hard work, but there is so much opportunity to sow seeds to build faith. Out of the research, it also points to just 50% of children grown up in a Christian home will continue to have faith as an adult. If you dive a little bit deeper into that statistic, I actually think it's probably a fair bit higher than that. I can look at my context. I grew up in a church family, in a Christian home, made some not great choices a little bit later, but I look at my friends that I grew up with, and again, I'm just taking an outside perspective because nobody really knows what's going on in people's hearts. But I look at the many friends that I grew up in church. We grew up in a great big youth group, and I would say probably it's more like 75% or 80% of my friends I grew up with now would say, hey, I'm not really living a life of faith. But I do believe that there's been seeds that have been sown in their lives that will produce a fruit. And actually, many of their decisions they make is often based on what they knew when they were younger. So there is hope for all of us. But also what I do learn, I mentioned a little earlier myself and my wife, a church planting out of our church in Newport. And one of our key families who are really planting with us is a friend of mine, Jim. Me and Jim have been friends since we've been 14. And now, just 5 years later, we're still friends. I don't know. Many years later, 20 odd years later, we are still friends. We are doing our best to disciple our families. We've both got young families, and we're on this journey of church planting together. So that's really, really exciting. So just on that, as a leader, as a person, I'm really passionate about how to be outreach. And I believe that we can share the gospel. But I also, in a church where we have a number of families, a large number of families, I'm also passionate about helping them recognise the role that they can do. So I'm all for outreach, and we need to evangelise, we need to share the good news of the gospel and put on amazing projects which demonstrate the love of Jesus. But there's also an amazing opportunity in our churches. And when I say our churches, I mean even the toddler group, the kids club, the messy church. I'm not talking about just a Sunday morning, by the way, because if we just take church as a Sunday morning, I think we're missing a massive proportion of people who see our church as their church. COVID highlighted that straight away we looked at who are those people we work with in church, but there's many people in your community who see your church as their church. But just because they don't step foot on a Sunday morning doesn't mean they're not part of the church. So how do we, this morning, when we're talking about joining the dots and family discipleship, I want us to get out of the perspective, it's only the families who we see week in, week out. Well, they come to your toddler group or your kids club for a reason. And it's probably not just the amazing food you do or the great care, there's something going on. So how do we make the most of those opportunities as well? This little pie chart I love. If you've been in any Care for the Family section or anything remotely around Faith at Home, you would see this pie chart. And can you see the screen okay? I'm just aware as I step back here, it feeds back. But as long as you can see the pie chart, that's great. So this pie chart I absolutely love. It takes a snapshot. Can I stress a snapshot? Because you may be in this room and you may have young children and you go, well, my child certainly doesn't sleep for that section. It's a snapshot. I'm sure many parents, carers, grandparents would love that green section to be a lot bigger than it is, but it is what it is. But it's a snapshot of a child's day. And we look at that. One of the things that I take from that snapshot is life is busy. This takes an average child up to the age of 10. And you look at that green section of sleeping, like I said, and sometimes we'd like that to be a lot bigger. Then we've got purple, which is school. Then we've got that section which is other activities. I know for some families that other activity is a lot bigger than that, because we've got swimming on a Monday, judo on a Tuesday, garden club on a Wednesday, goodness knows what on a Thursday. Life is busy. Life is busy for families, for parents, for carers. We could not do what we do in our family without the support of their grandparents, of the wider church family. Like today, my kids are being taken out by some friends. They're going to have a whale of a time. But then there's this section, which is orange, which is with the parent, or the carer, or the grandparent. It's the home. That's the home section. Let's call it the home. But what's really interesting for the church, that's really small green section. How often or how much effort do we as the church put into that section to put on the greatest kids provision, youth provisional service? And those things are great, by the way. But they should serve as a catalyst for the rest of the pie chart. So my question to us involved in children's youth family ministry and the church is, what are we doing in that small green section to equip families for the rest of the pie chart? What are we doing to help parents and carers make the most of the opportunities that exist in the orange section? What are we doing? Oh, yes, one. That's what I want, so I can hear you. So we're going to answer that right now with hurdles. No, this is great because that is so important. So in case you didn't catch the essence of that, it was life is busy. So there's a balance between expecting families to do homework kind of thing and that is exactly that. So we're going to touch on that in a moment. And that is a really, really important thought. What is also really interesting out of that, so there was some research done last year by Dr. Sarah Holmes in Liverpool Home University, and it found that 99% of all parents and carers who are part of the church want the church to partner with them when it comes to this idea. So, but there's a difference between working together and expectation of you to do more, and we'll touch on that in a moment, but it's a really, really important thought. But on that, how do we help parents and carers recognise that they are the biggest influencers? Whether we like it or not, we as parents and carers do have an opportunity that exists at home that don't exist anywhere else. But there are also the pressures and time constraints, which is a reality. But it would take the church 421 years to spend the same amount of time with that child. So we as churches need to really look and be clever about how to make the most of the opportunities we have with children and young people, but also how do we help families recognise that they also have an opportunity. And that's why the key is joining the dots. It's not an us and them. I was a youth worker for many years, and one of the things I think exists a little bit under the radar with youth leaders or with churches is us and them sometimes. The parents expect the youth leader to sort their young person out, and the youth leader is going, just get frustrated with the parents. But there is this tension which can exist that actually we work together. And I'm saying it a bit of tongue-in-cheek because I do think parents do appreciate the work that youth leaders do. But there's also sometimes that thing when I can only talk for myself, that I'd have parents come into my office and go, my young person's making this wrong choice, you sort it out. And I'd sit there and go, okay, I understand what they're really saying is, you've got a relationship with them. They may listen to you a little bit more than they do me, and I understand that. But I would always want to bring us to the point of going, how can we do this together? There is something about joining the dots. So we will, let me do hurdles before we go to Deuteronomy, because that will come off the back of that pie chart. So that is lovely in a theory, is that parents are the biggest influences, that we want to help parents and carers make the most of the opportunities that exist at home. There's hurdles. There's hurdles to everything we do. But what I love about the word hurdle is not a final point. A hurdle is meant to be overcome. So one of the things we have to do as the church is help families recognise that there are hurdles and how can we overcome them. I can't remove a hurdle, but I can help families recognise that they can be overcome. So one of the key hurdles is time. Life is busy. I don't know if you've looked at the social calendar of an average 8-year-old where it puts mine to shame. So how can we help families overcome that hurdle? I can't just wave a magic wand and suddenly go, there's more time. But one of the key things we can do is help families recognise it's not about adding more things into the busy to-do list, it's about making the most of the everyday moments. So an example of that is, Sometimes we can let families know what we're doing on a Sunday. And I think there's a good point in that. I think it's really good to know. I like to know what my kids are doing because I don't know if it's only my kids, but you talk to them after school and go, what did you do today? And they're like, I don't know. And it's the same on Sunday. But my kids are now cottoned on. If they answer the word Jesus, I'm probably going to be happy. So if I say, what have you done in the kids' church on Sunday? They're like, oh, we talked about Jesus. And you're like, okay, you kind of can't show them because that probably is half right. But I want to get to know that. So help joining the dots and letting families know what we're doing is a good thing. But expecting them to do homework is probably a bit too much. But this is what we can do, is help them recognise the everyday moments. And that's what Deuteronomy 6 is talking about. Is fix these words in mind in your hearts and minds. Tie them as symbols on your hands and bind them on your foreheads. Teach them to your children, talking about them when you sit at home and when you walk along the road, when you lie down and when you get up. What I love about this scripture is it's not saying add more things into your life. It's saying recognise the everyday moments. So Moses is talking not just to parents as well, he's talking to the whole tribe. He's saying, hey guys, teach these to your children. So what we can say is, how do we as the whole church, intergenerationally, how do we teach these things to our children, our young people, to our whole families? One of the best ways of doing it is making the most of the everyday moments. So what's more everyday than walking along the road, than when you go to bed, when you get up in the morning? So how can we help parents and carers recognise it's about making the most of the everyday moments? So, walking to school, going to the park, tea time, going to bed, these are all everyday moments. So, how can we equip parents and carers to go, well, making the most of the everyday moment might simply be praying together on the way to school. It might be watching Peppa Pig together. And actually, I don't know if you watch Peppa Pig. I do, a lot of it. I really enjoy it. I don't watch it with my kids, I just watch it on my own. But one of the best times I have conversations with my children is not after church on a Sunday. It's when we're watching things or playing. Do you know why? We watch Peppa Pig together, and then my little girl, she doesn't watch it as much as my little boy does. But a couple of years ago, she'd say, oh, Dad, Peppa's not being very nice to George. And then suddenly the conversation opens, are you always kind to your brother? That's the everyday moments. So it's not waiting for this perfect Instagrammable moment around the dinner table, because you know what? That never happens in my house. So if I took the how, again coming back to earlier, the how, if I say to you, this is how you do faith at home, you gather everyone around the table, you open the Bible, you sing a song, do you know what? That might not work in your house. But if I can help you recognise the everyday moments, do you know what? You probably watch telly together. You maybe watch sport and you play board games together. They are all amazing opportunities that everyday moments can happen. So how can we shift the culture with our families that we're working with to help them recognise that it's not about recreating church on a Sunday at home, but it's about making the most of the everyday moments. So in my house, we may never talk about what they did in church on a Sunday, but we will have an opportunity, just in the everyday moments, to talk about life. So if I'm not waiting for the perfect Instagrammable moment, I understand there's a moment when my child says, I don't want to go to school today. I get to ask why. And then maybe pray together. And then at the end of it, get them to ask a question. But it's about making the most of the everyday moments. So that's time. Second one is confidence. We don't know where to start. I think that is so true in our families. Whether they're in church every single week, or whether in our kids club or toddler group, they often don't know where to start, so they feel overwhelmed. I talked about the whole thing of homeschooling. I hated homeschooling. Why? Because I felt like every day there was an expectation on me to do something different. One day it was alphabet, next day it was phonetics, another day it was clock, and I felt like I was drowning. But when Miss Furtek rang me up, honestly, I just said, Dad, you're doing a good job. Suddenly I felt like I could take on the world. Why? Because it was less about what I'm doing or not doing. It was more about, hey, you're equipped to do this and fill me with confidence. So as the church, how can we help parents, carers and grandparents and families overcome the hurt of not feeling good enough? One of the best ways we can do it is be vulnerable. It's what we model. And then our families we work with, see you as the perfect person who have never had any doubts or have it all together, or they see it as someone who's real. When they see that, they're more likely to come to the table and go, hey, help me. I don't know where to start. So how can we help build confidence that inadequacy, don't feel good enough? This is massive. And I think this is why sometimes we think the goal with our children is get them to the church, and the church will sort them out because the church leader or the kids worker is perfect. But I don't know about you. That's why I put those blank questions in earlier. Because honestly, I've been in so many situations where I'm supposed to be leading and I've got all these things going through my head of going, not good enough, you should just quit, no one wants to listen to you. And some of that might be true, by the way. I'm sure there's people here who don't want to listen to me, and that's okay. But I need to be okay with understanding that, do you know what? There are times when I don't feel good enough. So how can we come alongside the parents and families and go, hey, speak life into them? And this is why I believe that kids ministry is so much more than children. Youth ministry is so much more than youth. It's the whole family. Can you as a volunteer or even a staff member do that, all of that? Of course you don't. That's why we have the church, intergenerationally. I have people in our church, older people, who are my biggest cheerleaders. And they make me feel like I can take on the world. And there's times where, do you know what? I don't parent my kids very well. And it's sometimes very public. But there's this one lady in our church who puts that arm around your shoulder and goes, you're having a tough week, aren't you? Yeah, I know. But there's not judgment, there's not right the shoulder. And that's what I think as the church we can do to help families overcome those hurdles. Be the coaches, be the cheerleaders, be the encouragers to help them overcome. Just checking the time. Okay. So a couple of practical things that we can do to help join the dots between church and home. One of the things we can do is recognise this as parents. There's ministry aspect, and this is talking about specifically families in the church. But I, as part of the church, I do a lot of things. There's a lot of ministries we have in churches. But do we actually recognise that parenting is part of that? That caring is part of that? By helping parents and carers recognise that building faith and raising their children is part of ministry. It helps the whole congregation know, it helps give value to the parents, it helps show investment, but more importantly, it empowers the parents. That hey, as parents, do you know what? You're the ones who are there Monday to Saturday. So how can we equip you in that journey? It removes the sense of an expert culture. I love my kids being part of children's ministry, kids clubs and things like that. But if I try to recreate the craft you do on a Sunday or on a Wednesday in my house, it's going to go horribly wrong. I'm not good at craft. But we joke about this. But in our minds, sometimes we have this thing of, sometimes children's work or youth work can be too good. Because we think it's too professionalised. And I'm all for doing things amazing, by the way, because I think that's really important. But how can we help parents and carers recognise it's not about being an expert? Because if we think it's that, we won't do anything. But actually, how do we recognise that there are experts out there? Well, I have a running joke with my 8-year-old that if she asks me a question, she's like, Dad, should I just talk to one of the other elders? I'm like, yeah, I think you should. Why? Because I understand where my weakness is. And there's some questions even my 8-year-old asks, I'm like, I haven't got the answer. So how do we remove and take the pressure off parents to think it's about being an expert, then you can pass on faith? Oh no. That mum who comes a couple of times a month and is struggling, well, I believe that God's called her to be that kid's mum. So how can I equip her and not just focus on what she doesn't know? How can I help equip her and support her? So help parents take the lead, it's pretty obvious. How can we help empower parents on this journey? This is key, dispelling the guilt. I think we as people are really good at feeling guilty, of not feeling like we're doing enough. So straight away, when you come to parents and carers and go, hey, you have a real opportunity to build faith in your child, straight away you go to, I'm not good enough, or I'm not doing enough. Look at that super parent over there. They are amazing at this. So one of the things we can do as a church is take the pressure off and dispel the guilt and go, do you know what? We know enough scriptures say there's no guilt or condemnation, so let's start living it. So how can we dispel the guilt? There's no such thing as a perfect parent. That's why I'm really good at this role, because everyone I speak to knows I'm not a perfect parent. Why? Because I tell people, you only have to spend an hour with me and my family to understand life is messy. So how can we dispel the guilt, take that pressure off families? How can we help encourage parents to see the simple things they can do in everyday life? Comes back to that Deuteronomy 6 scripture. It's the everyday moments. It's the playing with our children. It's the taking a moment to talk to them. Today, if I get home on time, I might get to go to Rocky Parade to watch second half of the football. I'm quite excited about that. But I also have an opportunity, and this week has been full on. I've been all over the place. We've been launching a new resource. I also only work part-time for Care for the Family. I also work part-time for our church. It's been full on. I have a choice when I get home tonight. And do you know what? There's not a right or wrong thing as well. Because sometimes I go in and all I want to do is sit on the sofa, grab a cup of tea, and check the football scores. But I also have an opportunity that my kids are going to run in. We're in Wales, and yesterday was St David's Day. And we have something called our Stepford. It's a very Welsh thing. They make stuff, they do stuff. Amazingly, both of our children won first prize in the art project. They can't wait to show me their medals. It's probably medals bought from Penland. But for them, they're the best things ever. So I have a moment that I have a choice. Do I make the most of the everyday moments? Do I just take a moment and just play with my kids and pretend they've just won the Olympics? Because that's what they feel like they've done. I'm saying this to help us to take the pressure off that it's this perfect moment. Well, how do we help the families we work with to encourage them? By being present is a massive part of the journey. And there's times where we can't be present. I do understand that. There's times where actually daddy needs to work, where daddy does need to get that email done or sent. But there's also times where I can see the simple things. It's the little things that make a big difference. My little girl, if you talk to her and said what are some of the things you do with daddy? This is what she'll say. She said, me and daddy always sleep under the stars on the trampoline. And I remember the first time she ever said that, I got a little bit confused. I was like, my child is lying. What does she mean? And then I remembered once, during COVID, we slept on the trampoline under the stars. But in her mind, she's like, we always do it. Why? Because it's the little things that make the difference. So this summer, I'm going to wait till the summer, because we live in Wales. In the summer it'll rain, won't it? But how do we help parents recognise we always do this? In children's minds, we always do this. My little girl also tells everyone, before church on a Sunday in the morning, me and daddy always go to McDonald's. Well, we do it every now and again. But in her mind, it's so special. So how can we encourage parents that, you know what, those are good things that we can be involved in? Start conversations between parents. Parenting is lonely sometimes. You feel like your child is the only one going through what they're going through. Take that into a church setting. Your 8-year-old is the only one who that morning woke up and said, I don't want to go to church today. Well, suddenly as a parent, you think you're failing, you think, oh my goodness, what's going on? And I need prayer ministry for my 8-year-old. Well, no, they might just woke up and wanted to play that day. So how can we help parents recognise that you're not the only one going through what you're going through? The only way we can do that is by starting conversations. It's by getting families together, parents and carers, not with an agenda sometimes, not with a provision or an event, but to go, do you know what? It's been tough this week. Can you pray for me? Or how would you navigate this conversation? Or how would you navigate this season? So how can we as the church facilitate those conversations? And we've got some good news that we've got some resources, free resources that can help you on that on our website, kitchentable.org.uk. I'll put it on at the end. But we have two amazing resources for parents called Raising Faith and Inspire, which is all about starting a conversation around how do we build faith at home. But we'll touch on that at the end. Okay, cool. This leads me to the best bit of the conversation because I think there's some practical things. It's great to understand the importance, but how do we actually help put this in place in our churches and our families? Through our research, through our conversations, we found that there are 5 elements that help build faith, that help join the dots between church and home. And hopefully there's some practical things that we can do as the church to help put these in as foundations in what we do as a church, but also into our families. And again, just a caveat, when I'm talking about church, I'm not just talking about what we see on a Sunday morning or a Sunday evening. How can we help put some of these foundations into the families we work with in Messy Church or in the toddler group? Because I believe that there is opportunities to help build faith and join the dots there as well. So, one of the areas that builds faith is home. A warm, affirming family where children feel safe, loved and accepted gives a secure foundation for faith to grow. What we know is all homes are different. All families are different. There's no such thing as a perfect home. What we also understand, we work in families and with people that home does not look like a warm, safe space. So we do understand that. But there's opportunities we can come alongside families and children in that case. But there is also an opportunity where we can help the families we work with help create a warm, safe space. Not a perfect home. My home is different to your home. But the desire is, how do we create home to be a place where my children feel like they belong? And that's a big challenge for me, is being present. I've joked about the football. I've joked about the busyness of life. But do you know what? Life is busy for people. But my hope is that when I'm home, my children feel like they can come and sit by me. Where they feel like Dad is present. Of course there's times where I've got to be on the phone, where I've got to send an email, where we've got to do the watching and all that. But we want to understand and help families we work with understand that there's opportunities that exist at home that exist nowhere else. But one of the areas we can do that is help them recognise it's the everyday moments. So when I first got the job at Care for the Family, and it was specifically about this idea of helping churches equip parents to build faith at home. My wife is far better at doing that than I am, by the way. Because I'm a bit like, we must do this, and she just does it every day. She's brilliant. But when I got the job, I came home from school, from work. It felt like school the first couple of days. But I came home, and my little girl was maybe 3 and a half. And I gathered my wife and little girl, my little boy hadn't been born at that time. And I said, we are going to do faith. And my wife looks at me and goes, what do you mean? So we're going to sit around the table, we're going to get the Bible open, and we're going to talk about the things of God. Why? Because I thought, that's my role now, so I've got to do it at home. And my wife's like, well, we do this every day anyway. We might not sit all around together, but we pray together, we talk about things, we maybe read a Bible story sometimes at there. But I said, no, we've got to do it around the table. I'm not sure who wanted to throw the Bible at me first, my daughter or my wife. It's my wife was like, you've missed the point. And I'm like, oh yeah, I have. Because it's not about this perfect moment. It's about making the most everyday moments. My little girl, she doesn't just sit there and want me to read a Bible story. She wants to act them out. She's immersive. Even then, do you know what her favourite Bible story to learn about is the walking on the water. Not because of the amazing truths of trusting Jesus. Why? It gets Daddy into trouble with Mummy. Do you know why? Because she tries to walk on water at bath time. And 8 years of doing it, she has not walked on water. And the water and the bubbles go everywhere. And my wife comes running upstairs and goes, you're doing that Bible story again. But I haven't known an adult Who knows that story better than her? Why? Because it's become immersive. But those opportunities don't exist on Sunday. Like, we can't act that out in the baptismal pool on a Sunday. Might not go well. But how do we help families recognise these opportunities that exist at home, that exist nowhere else? But often, it's obeying moments like playing together and watching stuff together. Belonging, awesome. That other home as well. So from Care for the Family, we're passionate about strengthening families. So we have resources that can really help you on that journey. So check out our website. We have resources that can help couples. We know not all homes have both parents at home. We do understand that. We have single parent support. We have support for children, parents who've got children with additional needs. We've got parenting support. We've got loads of great resources that can help you as the church on the journey of helping strengthen home. So we can help with that. Secondly, belonging. And this isn't an order, by the way. If you see any of our material, we do it as like a circle. Because actually it all works together. So secondly is belonging. What builds faith? Involving children at church and building relationships with others helps children feel that like they belong to God's family. Intergenerationally, together, all generations. That the psalm I read earlier, what generation will tell you good words? So as much as we're saying parents, you have an opportunity, we're also saying it's the whole church on this journey. So belonging is key to build child and young person's faith, especially young people. I was a youth worker for many years, like I said, and there was this one year I remember distinctively, we had loads of funding from the government. I don't know why. We ended up with all this funding that we could get out our church youth building, and we had the most amazing Xboxes, table tennis tables, all these kind of things. We also had all this funding that we could take these young people on these residentials. There was this 1 3-month period where it felt like every other weekend we were doing an activity or a residential. We had all this money, but you know what funding's like, we have to spend it in a certain amount of time when we lose it. And we did these most amazing experiences for these young people. We had the best youth centre in the whole of the city. We had all these most amazing experiences. Fast forward a few years later, fast forward a few years later, some of those young people then become, well, they all become adults. But you become friends with some of them. And I remember having a coffee with these two boys, Josh and Simon. I realise now they're only like 8 or 9 years younger than me, but at the time you feel like they're a lot younger. And I remember a few years later we were talking about the good old days of youth. None of them talked about the amazing youth centre we built. All the amazing residential activities we used to do. Do you know what they all mentioned? They would go, Gaz, I remember the times when we used to come around yours and Lois's house and eat burnt pizza. I was like, oh, it's that young that you remember? Straight away I got a failure. I think I failed them. I didn't give them great experiences, but then they'd say this. Do you know why we remember that? In all that was going on in our family, all the pressures of school, all those things, all the things of figuring out faith and do I believe in God and all this, they were the only times like we felt like we really belonged. And I was like, oh my goodness. At that moment I just thought we were just cooking some rubbish pizza and doing that. But it makes a difference. So how do we help create those opportunities to belong? One of the great things we can do is actually doing things together. I know there's times where it's brilliant for the children and young people to go off, and I'm all for that. But there's also times where we can do stuff together. There's some great resources on the website, free resources that get intergenerational ministry, eating together, scavenger hunts. You can check them out on our website. The Structures Feast is a brilliant. We have free table mats that you can order, and you just get all ages talking and doing activities together. We've got scavenger hunts. In our church, we regularly get the whole church out in a park and we just do stuff together. Because there's something about the beauty of together. That belonging. Do the children that you work with and young people you work with, do they see it as their church? Or do they just think it's mum's or nan's church or granddad's church? Because especially at a younger age, the way the children see the church is the way they perceive God. So if they think it's only mum's church, they'll think, well, God's just for mum. So how do we create those spaces that they feel valued and belong? How do we create those intergenerational relationships that you just exist? And I know that we need to be mindful of safety safeguarding and all those things, and so please be that. But my little girl, a few years ago, Macy, she grabbed me about 6 months before her birthday, and she's like, Dad, we can start planning my birthday. And I said, okay. She said, Dad, write my birthday list. So I'm writing it. She's like, these people I want to invite to my birthday. So there's a whole bunch of like little 5-year-old friends from school and church. And then she said this, said, Dad, write this one in big. So I thought, oh my goodness, this one's going to be trouble. She said, write Phil. And I said, okay. So I wrote Phil. Let me tell you who Phil is. Phil's one of my best mates at that time. He didn't have kids, wasn't married, he was our youth worker. But in her mind, she was like, Phil needs to come to my party. Do you know why Phil needed to come to a party? Because even in the midst of a crazy Sunday, Phil goes over and asks Macy, how's school? Phil sometimes teaches Macy things I do not want Phil to teach Macy. Phil, still now, he's got 2 young kids of himself. Phil picks up Macy from school sometimes. Phil always makes a moment to go, Macy, how you doing? Tells her some stuff about Dad that I don't want her to know. So in her mind, Phil's part of the family. So I was like, Macy, I didn't even make your list. So I had this great idea. Do you know what? Phil can go to McDonald's and take all the little 8-year-olds from church to McDonald's for a birthday. Phil did not like that idea. So Phil is now not part of the family. No, he is. But what I love about that story is, it makes me find that, well, it's part of the family. So how can we do that? Because there'll be times where she gets older where she might feel more comfortable talking to Phil and his wife Anna Jo about things or asking him questions. So how do we create those healthy relationships that exist? And I think church is probably the only place in the world where those things can exist. So let's make the most of them. So belonging is a crucial part in building a child's faith. Helping parents. Sorry, my voice is a little bit croaky. Yes, please. Do you want to?
My son's 19. About 6 months ago, he went to a road and did mine because he teaches at the Sunday school.
And there's such a beauty in that. So belonging is really, really key. What builds faith? Be real. It's not about expertise. Like again, this is just a circle of what we're talking about. Being expertise, parents don't need to be perfect. Yes, amen. But living out of faith in a genuine way inspires children to want this for themselves. I think there's a lie that sometimes we think we need to know all the answers. I grew up, and in my house, it was, if I had a question and my mum or dad didn't know the answer, they'd just go, well, that's the answer, get on with it. They would never kind of explore and go, let's explore it together. So I try and find the answer in other places, not always the best places. But as parents, or even just as people, Sunday school teachers, or girls' brigade leaders, we feel like we need to have all the answers. Sometimes the best thing we can do for children and young people is go, I actually don't know the answer. So let's find it out together. But that takes about being real. And what I love about this, I hate this one, by the way. I hate being real. Because I could be standing up here and I could be really ill. I could be in the most pain, but you'd have no clue. Because I just stand up and smile and carry on. But I think as people, we probably do a lot of that. We don't always admit the reality of what's going on in our life. And take that to a parent or grandparent. We think, sometimes if I really told my children, obviously age appropriate, the realities of life, I'll put them off. But actually, they'll learn them at some point. So how do we create those healthy environments where, you know what, life is tough, but I still believe that God is good. I still believe He is faithful. A number of years ago, so my wife is from East London, and her parents lead a large Assemblies of God church in Dagenham. And we were just, it was a typical Monday, our little girl was 3.5 at the time. And we are driving home from work, just picked up my wife from the train station, and we were going on holiday in a few weeks' time with my wife's parents. So we haven't seen them for a little while. And my little girl was called her granddad, her friend. She couldn't say granddad, she said my friend. We're driving home, and we're just FaceTiming just as a normal Monday, FaceTiming my in-laws, and it's like 7 o'clock at night, and we're just talking about the day, and we're really excited about the holiday. So my little girl Macy is going, my friend, holiday, and just talking about that. Said goodbye, like just a normal Monday. Went to bed that night. It was about 10:30 at night. My phone started ringing. And I answered it, and it was my sister-in-law. I think we'd been married maybe 9 years up to that point. I don't think my sister-in-law had ever called me in that time. So I woke my wife up and I said, Lois, is for you. And then Hannah said to her, put Gaz back on the phone. So I got back on the phone and said, hey Gaz, so Dad's just been rushed to the hospital. I was like, how do you mean? We literally talked to him 3 hours ago. I said, yeah, he's rushed in the hospital, get down to London now. So I was like, Lois, we need to get in the car and go to London. So we left my little girl at home, not on her own, don't worry, I got my parents to go over, so don't report me. But we got in the car, and we're driving, I don't know if you knew the M4 at all, but we're driving down, it's pouring down rain, it's about midnight right now, and we get to Swindon Junction, it's pouring it down with rain, absolutely hammering it down, midnight, the phone rings, so I answer it on the hands-free. Have you ever been in a moment where you know what's coming, but the person you're with has no clue? They're quite oblivious. Our first hour of the journey was very upbeat. We were going to the hospital, and my wife's like, wow, what happened? Like, we only spoke to him 3 hours ago. And then the call comes, and Hannah goes, hey, you might want to pull over. So we pulled over on the hard shoulder. We had just phoned out the day before as well. My wife was pregnant with our second child. So we were so excited to tell the family in a couple of weeks' time once the scans and all that. Apologies, this is quite even 5 years later, it's still going, because this was the scariest moment in my life. We parked on the side of the motorway, and my sister-in-law says, hey, Dad hasn't made it. And my wife loved her dad so much. He was her hero. Her world in one moment turned upside down. This is what happened. Pouring it down with rain, pitch dark. She opens the door, and she runs at the hard shoulder and throws herself on the floor. Cars driving past, raining. I'm like, oh my goodness. So I get it. I just do everything I can do to get her in the car. There's this hotel on the side of the motorway. We drove into the car park with ringing our friends in Hillier, our church. They're praying for us, world turned upside down. Get in the car park. People thought my wife was drunk. I just got her into the hotel. I was like, I'm so sorry. We've just had this bad news. And they were brilliant. They got her a Coke and just sat her down. It was the most surreal moment in my life. The reason why I tell you this story was, my little girl was 3.5 at the time. And everyone said, she don't know what's going on. She's oblivious to it. Just carry on. They know so much more than they do. Again, coming back to the age of faith and that kind of thing, is they see and hear so much. The week before the funeral, the celebration, we're at home in our living room, and my wife is crying on my shoulder. Again, coming back to this idea, I'm not very good at being real. My wife's crying on my shoulder, and I'm just trying to comfort her, not doing a very good job, to be honest. And my little girl comes running downstairs, and I thought, I know what I'll do. I'll leave my wife in the living room, I'll go and play with my little girl, because I'm really good at that. Because she doesn't even seem like me back in herself. Then all I thought, do you know what? I'll just shut the door, let her go in the playroom, and we just carry on having our moment. Before I knew it, my little girl came running in. She jumped on top of us, and this is what she did. She said, dear Jesus, my friend not here no more. Mummy, really, really, really sad. Help her, amen. And then we're running off and went, Dad, let's play Barbies. The reason why I say this is not to make me and Lois look like great parents, because we're not. But my prayer is that my little girl, when she turns 18, and not sure what to do after school, or job, university, all these things, she realises that God hears her prayers. When she's 25 and maybe has relationship challenges and realises life's not always easy, she realises that God hears her prayers. When she's 30 and maybe has kids of her own, she realises God can help her in that. But she needs to learn it somewhere and see it modelled somewhere. And I think home is a good place for that. And do you know what? We got to the funeral, and we're in this big tent on this park, having a funeral. We had set this big service tent, all very bizarre for a funeral. We couldn't fit everyone in the building. And she would have stood on the front row. She would have seen her mum, her auntie, and her nan singing the song, It Is Well With My Soul. Do you know what? I stood on that. It's not well with my soul, God. This is ridiculous. This makes no sense. Why has this happened? But do you know what? There's a reality that little girl and others see. I'm not saying we have to open our children's eyes to all the realities of life. Don't hear that. But we wonder why sometimes 15-year-olds get disillusioned because they think God always answers the prayer like we think they should. And then they get to 15 or 14 and they realise life is not always fair. Well, home is a great place we get to live that out. My little girl, my little boy gets to see us, the ups and downs of life. Is my life the only one with ups and downs? No. But they also see mum and dad trusting Jesus. Trusting God that actually, even in the midst of it all, there's tough times. So be real is key. And then we'll end it on this way. Cool. We'll end it on this way. So be intentional. Finding simple ways to involve God naturally in everyday life encourages children to know and love Him. As people, we're intentional about everything. Intentional about eating healthy, intentional about saving for a holiday, intentional about homework planning, not in my house we're not. But we're intentional about everything. But we think faith will just build on its own. So how can we help families recognise the everyday moments? To be intentional, we have a choice. But the great news is, our children and young people watch everything. So it's actually not about what we say, it's about what we do. But my little girl, I know I've told lots of stories about the children, but let me tell you this one. A couple of years ago, we were watching the rugby. I'm a passionate Welshman, my wife is English. We're watching the rugby, my wife's out in the kitchen grabbing some drinks. And in my humble opinion, the referee was not making very good decisions. Was actually, I think he was English personally, but hey, it's okay. He was not making good decisions. And I was not shy in telling the television that the referee was not making good decisions. 5 minutes later, it all calmed down and just enjoyed the rugby. My wife comes into the table, comes into the living room, bringing some drinks. I don't know why at that moment this had to happen, but it did. At this moment, my little girl stood up on the sofa, grabbed her shoe, and threw it at the TV and said, "Referee, you're English!" But here's the thing, my wife did not discipline my daughter or point to her. She just looked at me. Said, "Gaz." I said, "Well, I didn't say anything." She said, "But what were you saying 5 minutes earlier?" They watch everything. I say that as a bit of a joke to take the pressure off because we don't get it right all the time. But we also can make the most of the everyday moments. My little girl, we were in Morrison's. We were going to Aldi. She comes to the weekly shop with me. And there's this homeless guy who hangs around Aldi's. And I never sat down and said, "Mate, see, in order to be kind, this is what we do." I would just walk into the shop, and like many of us, I would always say this, "Hey mate, do you want any food?" A couple of weeks later, my little girl would come in, and then she'd jump in the trolley and basically go to this guy and go, "Hey mate, do you want any food?" I never sat down and said, "This is what we do." She just saw it and said, but what was funny is she copied exactly what I did. "Hey mate, do you want any food?" What was really funny, a couple of weeks after I first noticed it, we're going into Morrison's just picking up some milk because we've forgotten it. And we're walking in and my little girl shouts at this guy at Morrison's to go, "Hey mate, do you want any food?" The problem was he was just waiting for his wife to pick him up from work. So we then had to have a conversation. Not everyone who hangs around supermarkets needs our kindness or our money. But I like to laugh about this because, do you know what, how can we help parents recognise the intentional moment? It's not about adding things into the busy to-do list. It's about making the most of the everyday moments. Be intentional. And then that all circles around. I said there was 5, is prayer. How can we as the church pray for our families? How can we help our families recognise prayer is not just this routine or rhythm we do, but it's about modelling something. Do we as the church pray for our families? No judgment, by the way. No condemnation if we don't. But if we don't, can I encourage us to do that? Because as a parent, as young children, I need your prayers. You probably realise that already. But how can we pray? How can we pray? How can we pray for our parents, our carers, our grandparents, our families? How can we pray for our church? That we understand that it's whole family discipleship. And then finally, I'm really excited by this because you are the first people who I get to talk to this about. We this week launched a brand new resource for churches called a whole church approach to family ministry. Do you know how new it is? I tried getting the web address, and the web address was about 150 words. because I think it might be hidden. So I thought the easiest thing I can do is I've got my laptop here. So this resource is all about churches helping recognise how they can support families. We've got 3 videos on them. There's a digital booklet. You can either buy the book for £5 or you can download it for free. You just sign up. So I've got a website. If you want to have a look at it, you can do it there. If not, my email address is there. For any questions or thoughts, do swing me an email. But if you think, I would love to dive into this a little bit deeper, we have a resource that can help you. It's brand new. So I've got the website. You can sign up to it then. That was the best thing. I did put the website in, but I was like, oh my goodness, I'll never find that. It's like, so I've got the website up on my laptop. So if you did want to sign up to it, you can just pop your email address and things there. And it's a free resource. Like I said, you can buy the book, but there's a digital book. It links to all the videos, and it's about our children's work teams, our family teams, ourselves, journeying this through to see how we can serve those in our church, our community. So do you have your hand up? Oh yes, sorry. Gareth Hillier at cff.org.uk. So in children's faith, a whole church approach to family ministry. I'll have my laptop at me here. If as you go for lunch, you want to sign up to that or see that, please do come. Apologies, that's the only way I can think of doing that. But like I said, it's brand new. We launched it on Thursday. Victoria was actually with us. And so it's really brand new. I'm not sure it's even public yet, so hey, it's okay. I'm one of the bosses, so you can have it. Please do come see that. But I want to say thank you. Like I said right in the first session, thank you for being here today, but thank you for coming on to this session. Over lunch, I'm not going to rush them straight off, so if you've got any questions or thoughts or want to sign up to that resource, do come do that as you go get your lunch. But thank you for that. I hope you've got something out of it. Hope you find it interesting. Do find our website, kitchentable.org.uk. You can sign up to our free mailing list for children's and family and youth leaders. We send out resources around this idea of family ministry, but there's also loads of free resources on there. Do check that out. Do check out this brand new resource. Thank you so much. Take care.